What's good, everybody? Today we are following up from last week with a breakdown of the first round of the NBA playoffs. But before that, remember to like the video, subscribe if you aren't already, hit the bell icon if you are, and you know the drill by now. Let's get to it. So the Lakers-Nuggets Game 5 kicked off Monday night in Denver, and the Lakers lost in devastating fashion again. Jamal Murray hits a game-winning shot to eliminate the Lakers and win Game 5, 108-106. And the Nuggets successfully complete the gentleman's sweep. This was all too reminiscent of Game 2, and honestly just proved that Jamal Murray, Jokic in the clutch is just too much for the Lakers to handle right now, just like we pretty much all thought. I think the Lakers' biggest issue is outside of Anthony Davis, they have absolutely no rim presence or big man presence to put defensive pressure on Jokic. And even though Jokic had an off series offensively somewhat, he still basically had nobody other than Anthony Davis to slow him down. So really it comes down to the Lakers just not having the manpower to challenge Jokic in the front court. Even though I think we all can say, I think Anthony Davis gave it everything that he had. And even still, Jokic finished Game 5 with 25 points, which is his second lowest scoring performance of the series, actually, if you take a deeper look. 20 rebounds. 18 defensive rebounds on 12 field goals made out of 21 field goals attempted, 57% field goal percentage. Make that make sense. How is an off game 25 points, 20 total rebounds, and 7 assists? LeBron finished the game with 30 points on 52% shooting from the field, and Anthony Davis poured in 17 points, pretty great defense, and 15 rebounds. But the star of this game, no doubt, is Jamal Murray, and he had a bounce-back game, finishing the game with 32 points, shooting 46% from the field, along with the game-winning shot. But looking at the series averages, I think this opens up a larger discussion, especially surrounding how great Nikola Jokic truly is. In a series where Anthony Davis really challenged Jokic a majority of the time outside of the moments where it really mattered, Jokic still averaged 28 points for the series, 16 total rebounds, and 9 assists, and actually led every player in the series in points, rebounds, and assists. I think something to speak about as well is just how underrated Nikola Jokic is on defense. 62 total defensive rebounds is absolutely absurd. And thinking about defensive rebounds in the context that they literally end defensive possessions, you have to admit that Nikola Jokic is holding his own on defense and might be one of the greatest defensive rebounders we've ever seen, maybe outside of like Moses Malone or Dennis Rodman. So his individual one-on-one defense may not be the best outside of the advantages he gets with his body, his weight, and his positioning down low in the post, but are able to get past him. He's just going to get the rebound if you miss, which pretty much nullifies any advantages that his opponents may have in individual type matchups. As a LeBron fan, it does suck to see the Lakers go home, even though we pretty much knew this would all happen from the beginning of the year. But on the flip side of the coin, it truly is amazing to watch the Denver Nuggets perform and execute at the highest level and demonstrate just truly how great they are. All right, so moving on to Celtics versus Heat. The Celtics secure back-to-back wins in games 4 and 5, and Derek White debuted a new form, apparently, now that he's balled in the playoffs. This is his first year being balled, and he definitely stepped up in a big way for the Celtics, leading them to victory in games 4 and 5, and pretty much leading them in scoring, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, no, fact-checking that is correct. He did lead them in scoring the final 2 games to close out the Heat. And honestly, that just shows how versatile and how dangerous of a player he truly is. No hair, no problem, I suppose. So this week, the Celtics complete the gentleman's sweep and officially eliminate the Miami Heat. Last week, I said that nobody fears the Celtics, and while that may have counted for the Heat, maybe they should have feared them. Nobody knew if Jimmy Butler was coming back from his MCL sprain. And in case you missed it, he did not come back. So for the Heat, the summary there is no Butler, no hope. We talked about how great and deep the Celtics roster is all year. And I think in this series, perhaps maybe I overestimated the Heat, Jimmy's knee injury, and I underestimated the Celtics. Either way, going into the next round and the conference semifinals, the Celtics are shaping up to potentially have the easiest next round opponent, and that being the Cavaliers or potentially the Magic. I do think if the Magic move on to face the Celtics, they will be a better test for the Celtics to move on to the conference finals.
Front, Alexander Walker with 2:27 to play.
Yeah, Beal should have pulled up his shot that or tapped Towns at the rim.
10 to shoot. Edwards. Oh, Edwards! A signature slam! Timeout. 2:12 left. 4-point game.
Moving along to the Suns versus the Timberwolves in a not so surprising turn of events. The Phoenix Suns were swept 0-4 by the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Minnesota Timberwolves secured their first series playoff win in 20 years. In Game 4, we can see Anthony Edwards dominated again with 40 points, shooting 56% from the field. The Phoenix Suns tried to give their best punch and make a stand to avoid being eliminated, and Kevin Durant poured out 33 points on 70% field goal shooting. And Devin Booker definitely went out like a true shooter and put up 49 points on 61% field goal percentage. Bradley Beal didn't give you much. Overall, he was a -12 with 9 points and 4 for 13 overall from the field. And yeah, this series pretty much was over before it began. The Suns are incapable of putting up any defensive resistance whatsoever. They have no point guard, and this team just was not constructed for success from a roster standpoint, and honestly, that has to go back to the general manager and front office. I also think that the Suns' general manager and front office has to face the reality that is in front of them, but this will also be a topic we'll explore in more future content to come. But congrats to the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's nice to see that they are finally turning the page in the right direction as it pertains to winning and success. Anthony Edwards appears to be unstoppable, and the Minnesota Timberwolves defense appears to still be somewhat present. And I'll say this, they certainly will have their hands full going into the conference semifinals where they'll be matched up against the Denver Nuggets. Now, at the time and recording of this video, the second round has commenced, and Anthony Edwards just dropped 43 points on the Denver Nuggets. And the Minnesota Timberwolves, as a result, stole Game 1 in Denver. This is going to get very interesting. So the Suns were the first team to get swept in the first round. The second team to get swept in the first round was the New Orleans Pelicans. Looking at the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the New Orleans Pelicans, there's not much to cover here. The Pelicans were swept, and the headline here is no Zion, no hope. Zion being gone and being hurt is a thing that seems to be a pattern, and we've been saying this for a while now. So in regards to Zion, should we be asking ourselves, is he a bust? Focusing our attention on the Oklahoma City Thunder, that team is very young. They did have an MVP candidate in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, so they are a force to be reckoned with. Moving forward, where they'll face the next team in today's video that we'll talk about, which is the Dallas Mavericks and their closeout and elimination of the Los Angeles Clippers. It looked like the Clippers were going to hold on and push this series to 7 games, but after Game 4, where we saw Paul George and James Harden both combined for 66 points, which is amazing. Paul George went 11 for 19 from the field. James Harden had a really great game, went 12 for 17 from the field, and also gave you 7 assists. After Game 4, though, Luka and Kyrie just proved to be too much, and then the Dallas Mavericks are playing defense now. So the Mavericks close out the Clippers and the series 4-2. Looking at the series totals and averages here, there's nothing shocking. Luka led the series and led all players in total points, total rebounds, and total assists. Kyrie Irving basically led the entire series in all players in total efficiency. Shot 51% from the field, 44% from 3, and 85% from the free throw, just missing his standard 50-40-90. Harden made a decent return to the playoffs, and I don't know if we can say he made up for his flame out in Philly, but he certainly was here to help alongside Paul George and tacked on 21 points for the series, 8 assists, 4.5 rebounds, which is a similar return to form, at least for the older James Harden. And Paul George averaged 19.5 points, 7 total rebounds, 5 assists, and shot 41% from the field. And honestly, I think that we can say this is probably a disappointing series overall for Paul George. And on the topic of disappointment, that is a perfect segue into the Milwaukee Bucks versus Indiana Pacers series overall. And I guess before we take a dive into the final games of this series, let's just say that the entire season for the Milwaukee Bucks is the definition of disappointing. They made the move for Dame, opened up the door for Boston to make the move for Jrue Holiday. Giannis got hurt. Dame was dealing with some very personal off-the-court issues. And you had coaches fired, coaches hired throughout the year. And so, in the end, you end up with Doc Rivers, which is just a recipe for disaster. And we can see they clearly limped into the playoffs. But diving into the end of the series itself, after Game 3, the Bucks would go on to lose Game 4 by 13 points, and then in Game 5, the Bucks would bounce back and show some veteran resilience and win Game 5 without Giannis and Damian Lillard to push the Indiana Pacers to the penultimate Game 6. Now, in Game 6, Damian Lillard did make a heroic return from injury and led the team in scoring with 28 points, with 7 shots made out of 16 field goals attempted. But it was not enough. We did see 3 of the Bucks players score double-digit points. And the bottom line of this series just came down to the Pacers being the better team without the Bucks, considering the Bucks do not have Giannis, and when they did have Damian Lillard, he just was not fully healthy. Pacers move. Moving along to the 76ers versus the New York Knicks series. This series was pretty much in line with the Pacers-Bucks series, in that, similar to the Bucks, the 76ers just were never able to fully walk into this series healthy. In fact, they basically limped into the series with Embiid coming back from the knee injury and then also falling victim to Bell's palsy. And since last week, the New York Knicks took a 3-1 commanding series lead, and Jalen Brunson basically started averaging 40. From that point on. The 76ers did bounce back in Game 5 to stave off elimination behind a heroic performance by Tyrese Maxey, who put up 46 points. But yeah, Brunson just completely had their number in the final 3 games of the series. In Game 6, Embiid goes for a more impressive 40 points, but somehow manages to come up with 1 rebound in the fourth quarter. And more interestingly enough, Tobias Harris plays 29 minutes and 20 seconds, attempts 2 field goals, and ends the game with the same amount of points as you and I. Philly is once again eliminated and blocked from reaching a new level of success in the playoffs, and the New York Knicks move on. So looking at the Cavs versus the Magic, since last week, the Cavs went on to win Game 5 by 1 point, and then the Magic turn around and bounce back to avoid elimination and win Game 6 by 7 points. This series has been pushed to 7 games, and I think that's always interesting. But the bottom line is this series and the winner of this series ultimately is just going to go on in the next round and get completely demolished by the Celtics, or they should go on and get demolished by the Celtics, regardless of whether the winner is the Cavs or the Magic. I think the Cavs may be a tougher matchup for the Celtics, just looking at things on paper, but I don't know. I think the Magic have proven that they're probably the better overall team right here, even though the Cavs may have the best player. The best player conversation in this series is interesting, especially when we pull up the series summary and averages. I know this is different positions. Paolo is a forward, Donovan's a guard, but you have to consider that Paolo is only in his 2nd year, and obviously Donovan's had many more runs in the playoffs and much more experience in this type of setting. Donovan Mitchell is averaging 27 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists on 47% shooting, while Paolo Banchero is giving him 25 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists on 48% field goal shooting. So the shooting efficiency between these two is pretty much tied. But I think there's definitely a case to be made that Paolo is the best player in this series so far. And if I had to put money on who takes Game 7 Sunday night, I'm rolling with the Magic, even though they're the less experienced team. I really feel like they've proven in this series so far that they are the better team. And with that, that concludes our overview, breakdown, and updates on the first round of the NBA playoffs. Give me your thoughts and let me know what you think about the first round of the NBA playoffs in the comments below. And we will pick up things next week with a breakdown of the second round of the NBA playoffs. Until then, everybody stay safe and have a great weekend.